Hey guys, my name is Haley and today I'm going to be filming my October wrap-up. This is going up slightly late because I have not been in a filming mood in the last 2 weeks, so it's going up now. Don't know when I'm actually putting it up, but we are going to talk about the I think 18 books that I read in the month of October. I just kind of went for it and read so many things over the course of 3 weeks because I think the first week I didn't read as much and then I just read everything at once. Most of them are spooky books. That is the vast majority of what I read, although the last week I was low-key participating in Riley Marie's Smutathon, I think it's called, and vaguely got into some romance books, which was an interesting experience, so we'll talk about that later. Let's get right on into it. So, the first book that I read, I feel like these first couple I read so long ago, so I apologize if I don't remember details of them. After reading 18 books at once, which is the most I think I've read in a month this entire year, if I'm not mistaken. But the first of those was Near the Bone by Christina Henry. I read one other Christina Henry, and it was the Alice in Wonderland retelling, and this was, I don't think, any sort of retelling. It is a story about a woman who lives in a cabin in the middle of the woods with her husband, and there are sketchy things going on, and there is possibly some sort of creature hiding in the forest. And that is all I can really say about it. This reminded me very much of a very big book a couple of years ago, but I cannot tell you what it reminded me of because it gives away a huge part of the plot. So there's that. But I gave this 3.75 stars. I thought it was very fun. I like the whole concept of not being able to see the monster. So this was a good portrayal of that, in my opinion. Next up, I read what's probably going to be on my favorites of the year, and that is And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagich, I believe. And this is a book I've had on my TBR for probably 2 years. I feel like it's been on my TBR for a very, very long time, and I wanted to listen to the audio because I've always heard that the audio is fantastic. And they were not wrong, of all the people I've heard say that. The audiobook is so creepy. It might be one of the creepiest audiobooks I have ever listened to in my life because there's just moments of sound effects. They're the narrators do really weird voices every once in a while. There are certain points in the audio where the narrator is talking, but there is a whispering voice talking, having different words spoken and whispered in the background while they're talking. It's so terrifying. And this is one that I probably went out of my way to not listen to at nighttime because it is relatively creepy. And then the ending 100% was not what I was expecting out of the story, so I will say that. Will not say if it was good or bad, but judging by the fact that this has a 4.75 rating from me, you can probably guess. Because there were two endings and plot twists at the end that I was one of them I was I don't know if I like this, and then all of a sudden I was I do actually really like this, and it's probably one of the most fun books I've read in quite a while, so highly recommend this one, and I want to read more of this author's works soon. And then next is another one of my favorites of the entire year. Might be my new favorite thriller. I'm so sorry to the Ruth Ware book that has been my favorite for so long. The Turn of the Key has been my favorite thriller for 2 years, I want to say. This one might have dethroned it, I don't know. And that is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. This book had me on the edge of my seat. I completely binged this. I had been hearing about it for a couple of months from a handful of booktubers whose thriller recommendations I really trust, and the plot twist that's 50-60% into this got me so good. I was so surprised, and then I also sat there and went, I should have seen that coming, and I just didn't. And I feel like that is just the entire point of the book, although it had other really, really fun plot twists as well. I loved both of our POV characters. They were absolutely fascinating, and I don't even know if I've said, it's about a woman who lives on a college campus who murders men who sexually assault women on campus if she finds out about it. And does it without, while getting away with it, nobody knows it's her. Which is just a very fun premise to begin with, but the writing was so good. I'm obsessed with Lane Fargo. I did read her other book this month, which was not as much my favorite, but for personal reasons, which we'll talk about later, but I cannot wait to read another thriller from this author. This was so fun, so fast-paced, so well written. Probably my new favorite thriller. And then we have Neath. This is a book that I picked up back in Ohio at a used bookstore, and I picked it up because the author is from Kent, which is very, very close to my hometown, and I was like, oh, I'll support a local author. This has like barely any reviews on Goodreads, and I was like, I'll read it. I'll read it for spooky season because it's a ghost story. And I actually ended up really enjoying this. I thought this was going to have more to do with like angels because the first chapter is about angels, but it's mostly just a ghost story and how this couple who moves into a rundown house and are trying to like renovate it, but they're renovating different parts of the house. Like the husband is working in the basement and the wife is working up in the attic, and she finds this little ghost girl. And that's all I can say about it. There are parts of this that were super creepy, especially a lot of the scenes with the husband in the basement and the entity that he discovers. I will say the end of this took more of a fantasy twist, in my opinion, rather than the paranormal that it was going with for most of the book, but I still very much enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Big fan. If this author ends up writing anything else, she is, again, a local author to my area in Ohio, so I would love to check out more of her books. Also, I really love this cover. It's so pretty. Oh my gosh, next up is actually, oh no, I don't know. This is going to be my favorite thriller, or They Never Learn. They're kind of tied in my head right now. As some of the best books I've read this year, let alone best thrillers I've ever read. And that is Falling by T.J. Newman. I started this audiobook with the intention of like reading 30% of it and then taking a break and like going and doing other things, and I started listening to it and I was hooked by like the 10% mark and could not put it down and was just like, oh, sorry to everything else I was gonna do. In the next couple of hours I'm going to do nothing but finish this audiobook because it was so intense. I really loved our main character. I loved the social commentary that was going on in this. I loved the entire reason behind the terrorist attack. It's not really a terrorist attack. It is about this pilot who gets on a plane. He is piloting the plane through the air and he gets a call from somebody who has his family held hostage and says, hey, you need to crash this plane or your family dies. And how he handles that situation. There was so much good social commentary in this. That's probably why, on top of the writing being so well paced, that I love this so much. This is all I want in thrillers. And this is like a debut from this author, and I was shocked when I read that. So high alert. Will be on complete high alert for anything else that TJ Newman writes. Next up, I read The Dark Beneath the Ice by Emelinda Berube. And this was much more fun than I expected it to be. It's about this girl who is starting to lose time, in which she can't remember what she was doing at certain periods, but she's also seeing things and she's not sure if she's hallucinating or if they're actually happening and are paranormal in some way. One thing I appreciated about this is I feel like a lot of paranormal or like spooky things go along the lengths of, oh, you don't need professional help, you don't need to go to therapy, you don't need to go see a doctor, you can figure it out for yourself because magic. They didn't do that for the most part. She went to the doctors, they gave her tests, they managed to say that they didn't think anything was wrong with her, but they gave her medication, and like I liked the way that was handled especially. And also something I went into this without realizing I probably did when I first heard about this book, but it is a sapphic romance, and the romance was adorable. I loved the character that she meets in this and their entire dynamic. I also loved the way this plot went. There were times I was like, is this gonna be paranormal? Or is it just going to be like a psychological thriller where like it's completely something else? But I love the direction this went in. I thought it was so fun. It's super fast paced. It's really short. It's like barely 300 pages. And it definitely made me want to pick up other things by this author. Big fan. And I gave it 4.5 stars. It's a very fun little YA novel. And then I finally read Interview with the Vampire. I've talked about this a couple times in the last few months since I said it was going to be on my TBR for spooky season because I grew up watching this movie. This is one of my dad's favorite movies that he's ever seen, so I've watched it several times, but not since I was a kid. And it is essentially, I think it's one of the OG, they're telling a chronicle, their story, and it's this vampire telling a chronicler of his story of how he became a vampire, who turned him, and all of that. And I thought it was perfectly fine. I give it like 3.25 stars. There was a certain aspect of this, sorry if you don't want spoilers for this book, I will put my hands up for spoilers. there's an aspect of this where our main character has this romance with a female vampire, except the female vampire is in the body of a little girl. Even though she is a vampire and is thousands of years old, she's still in the body of a little girl, and they had a romance, and I was not about that. I didn't like it at all. It made me very uncomfortable. So that knocked down several stars for me. But yeah, spoilers over. I thought this was perfectly fine. I know it's a series. I'm not going to continue the series. And I'm glad that I read it. I don't regret reading it. I just thought that one part was a little too much out of my comfort zone, and I was not a fan. The writing was fine. I might try other Anne Rice novels, but I don't think this series is for me. And then probably one of my favorite things of the year, just because I love the person so much, came out. And that is Misha Collins' book, Some Things I Still Can't Tell You. It's his little book of poetry. As you can see, this is probably the first thing I've annotated in a very, very, very long time. Like, I don't think I've annotated a book in like almost 2 years. And this was just the perfect little fast read. I don't love poetry. I don't know if it's just because I have so much love and respect for Misha that I enjoyed this. If I just enjoyed being in his head and understanding and seeing some of the ways that he feels. Also, fun story. Apparently Misha, when this book came out, was in my hometown, my tiny little hometown in Ohio, for some reason, and left books in a Target there. And I'm in Georgia. And I was so upset. We were out at a restaurant when this happened. Actually, I was going to see Dear Evan Hansen when this happened, and we were at a restaurant. And I was very upset. But I thought this was a very, very good read. I'm very happy that Misha is doing something after Supernatural, which ended like exactly a year ago, I think, from when I'm filming this. And I love Misha Collins so much. He's one of my favorite actors. He plays my like top 3 favorite character of all time, which is Castiel from Supernatural, if you didn't know. And I loved seeing a lot of his thoughts. I also love the entire like hunt he did on, like, what's it called, a scavenger hunt that he turned it into a Gishes thing, that which is his charity that he runs, where it became a scavenger hunt of, oh, go find a Target at your local Target, some signed books, which I did not get a signed one. But this is split up into love poems, hope, joy, running, and other good things, longing, sadness, my people, the parents, and the kids. And I just thought a lot of these poems were actually beautiful, and as somebody who doesn't care that much about poetry, I feel like that's saying something. But I gave this 5 stars. Was there any realm in which I wouldn't have? Probably not. And then I read probably one of my least favorite books of the year, and that is The Death of Jane Lawrence. If you've been around here for a while, you know that Caitlin Starling's other book, The Luminous Dead, is one of my favorite books of all time. I didn't know this was coming out, I'm not gonna lie, until Kate reminded me that it was coming out, and so we buddy listened to it on audiobook. And the things that I learned where I won't like gothic anything, gothic literature of any kind, because I kept saying, this reminds me of this. This reminds me of this synopsis. And I know I kept saying, like, isn't this the plot of Rebecca? Isn't this the plot of Jane Eyre? Isn't this the plot of Flowers in the Attic? Like, there were certain things that I was like, isn't this the plot of that other thing? And she was like, yeah, no, that's most gothic literature. And I was like, apparently I don't like gothic literature, is what I learned from this book. There was also a weird amount of, like, magic. Like, this felt like it should have just been, like, a gothic literature novel, but this had magic for some reason that had nothing to do with the plot, and I didn't understand why it existed. And there was very few things that I liked about this book. It was also super insta-lovey. Like, it started off with a marriage of convenience, and then, like, within 3 days, she was in love with the man that she was marrying for convenience. And I wasn't about that life either. I was not a big fan at all. I gave this 2 stars. I wish I liked it more, because I do really like her first book that came out. So now I'm kind of scared that I'm not going to like anything else that she writes, which is very depressing. And then we have my trash novels of the year that I've been loving. They're so fun. And the first of those is Crave. This is this cover that looks like Twilight that I remember when it came out, because everybody's like, that's Twilight. Like, that is the Twilight cover, but slightly different. And that's literally what they were going for. This starts off as literally Twilight, except it's set in Alaska at a boarding school. And that is the exact setup you get for like half of the first book. The only difference is, once I read more of the series, is that there are more creatures in this world than just like the vampires and werewolves of Twilight. There are lots of different creatures. There's like witches, there are dragons, like the dragons that can turn into people. There are other things that are going on in this world, which I do really like the world. The world is fascinating. I guess I'll just talk about all three of them here. So the first book I thought was really fun. It was very trashy fun, basically Twilight. We all know I love Twilight. Love me a good paranormal romance, and I was like, perfect, this is all I want. And then I read the sequel, which is called Crush. And I can't tell if they're doing the Sarah J. Maas like new love interest, or if we're doing like the Twilight love interest. There is a second love interest, but they're not the one. Because the problem is, I like the second love interest so much more. And we actually get to see him in the second one. And I was like, oh no, is this going to be a trilogy where we're going to end up with the first love interest? It's not that I don't like him. I think he's perfectly fine. He's very much like an Edward. Although I will say the second love interest is not a Jacob. He's his own character, in my opinion, at least from my experience of reading Twilight knockoffs. I was like, oh no, if there's 3 books, we're probably going to go back to the original love interest. And then I found out there are 6 books. And these 3 books came out in the last year, and the next 3 books are coming out next year. And I am now like 60% into the 3rd book, which is called Covet. And then I'm going to have to wait till February for the 4th book. And I'm very upset because I thought this was a trilogy going into it. So if you're the same as me and thought this was a trilogy, I'm so sorry. Here's your warning. It's not a trilogy. It's not even a saga like Twilight was with 4 books. Like, no. It's a 6-book series at least. But these are so fun. They're so trashy. There was like a whole Triwizard Tournament vibe. Like, if you smashed Harry Potter, Twilight, and like Discovery of Witches into one book and made it like slightly more adult, like more adult on the adult side of Discovery of Witches, with like the swearing and like that type of thing, but kept the trashiness of Twilight, you get this series. I think it's very fun. I'm having a great time. I do think our main character is kind of annoying. She talks in like chat speak sometimes. She'll be like, all of a sudden be like, oh, FML. And I'm like, people don't talk like that out loud, but okay. So yeah, it's very, very fun. It's very fun, trashy, Twilight-esque series. So if that's what you're looking for in your life, which I definitely was, highly recommend. Next up, I read Survive the Night by Riley Sager. Riley Sager has been incredibly hit or miss for me. There's 2 that I really liked, 1 that I DNF'd, and this one I thought was fine. This is a story about a girl who gets in a dude's car, and she is carpooling with him, a stranger, back to, I believe, Ohio, where her family's house is, and doesn't tell anybody where she is. And the entire time she's like trying to decide if she trusts the stranger after she's already in his car and on like a several-hour car ride in the middle of the night. And I really, really liked the like spooky, like fear, like primal female fear of being in a car with a man that you don't know, or like being near a strange man who might hurt you or murder you. That I really enjoyed. And then there was a plot twist about halfway through that I just went, I don't think I like this. I did not like the direction it went, which tends to be, there's like a 60% point of every Riley Sager book that I can tell if I'm gonna like it or not. And this one definitely had that, where I went downhill of, I'm not on board with this. So I gave it 3.25 stars. First half was great. The second half was nah. Next up, I read Temper by Lane Fargo. This is the other Lane Fargo book that she has out. I thought this was really well written. I liked our main character. I did not like the way that the plot went, but that is a personal thing of, I don't like reading from like a first person perspective of somebody who is falling into, which this isn't true either, because I actually liked it in the project. It takes a lot for me to actually like this and for it to be well done, of a person who is falling into like a very manipulative situation, or like a very manipulative relationship with a person, and that's exactly what this was. It's a girl who's auditioning for a show for this director who is known to be a bad person. He's really hard to work with. Like, he likes to mess with people, and he's just known for kind of either ruining actors' careers or making them skyrocket into fame, and there's no in between. But anybody who's ever worked with him says, don't work with this guy, don't do it. No matter how much you want to be famous, don't do it. And our main character does it anyway. I gave this a 3.5 stars. I thought it was perfectly fine. If you like the twisted, messed up like stories like this where it's kind of a romance but also a commentary, again, it's hit or miss for me if those work. This one was just fine for me. 3.5 stars. I'm very excited to read other books by Lane Fargo though, and this audiobook was fantastic. I will say her audio's so good. And then me and Kate Buddy listened to Salem's Lot by Stephen King. Obviously, this is the King that I've probably been wanting to read the longest. And because I've been in a vampire mood, I was like, this is perfect for this year since all I want to do is read vampires. And I've really, like, there are things about King's writing that I really, really like. I think he's very good at setting the tone of a story and, like, the setting of a story at this dreary small town where spooky things are happening. He's so very well crafted at that specifically. And the only thing that I had an issue with this book is that while there were a lot of creepy scenes in which they were well described and terrifying of us learning about these vampires and how this town found out about it, and like the creepy scenes in this were great, but when there weren't creepy scenes happening, it was kind of boring. There was also a point where we had already learned about the vampires and then we were just hunting them, and that is not as much fun as me being in suspense of what are these vampires, what are they doing, like what's their plan. So I gave it 3.75 stars. Not my favorite King, but it is a very, very solid Stephen King. I don't even know if I've ever said my favorite is Stephen King. My favorite is Pet Sematary. I'm also a big fan of It. I'm also a big fan of Rose Madder, which I feel like nobody ever talks about. That is the one Stephen King that I never get anybody to talk about. So if you've read that, please talk to me about that in the comments down below. And then we might have my biggest disappointment of the year, because I've been thinking and wondering what this book was going to be for so many years since he first teased it. And that is Empire the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. First of all, this cover is stunning, and I was going to buy it, and then I read it and I was like, I don't know if I want to spend $25 on that, because I gave it 3 stars. This is a high fantasy in which the sun has disappeared and the vampires kind of took over the world because of it, because they can be out during the day now. And it is this huge commentary on religion, I swear, for most of it, because me and Kate listened to probably the first half of this in the span of 2 days, and then finished it in the span of another like 2 or 3 days, like a month later. I also have been saying for years that I feel like I don't do as well with high fantasy on audiobook, and that is how we listen to it. It's like a 23-hour audiobook or something ridiculous, which I also haven't been listening to super, super long audiobooks that much recently. So there are a lot of factors that probably went into me not enjoying this very much at all. I also haven't even read high fantasy in like well over a year. So I feel like I read this at the wrong point. 2, I just felt like it could have been so much smaller. And I know he did like beefed it up this much because it is a high fantasy world and you have to beef up the world and all of the characters and everything. But so much of it felt like a commentary on Christianity specifically, which I am all for that entire commentary. Like, let's talk about it. But did you have to create an entire fantasy, like high fantasy world just to be able to talk about that involved vampires? I don't know. I also could not keep a single one of these characters straight. There were so many flashbacks of our main character and other people he knew then, and then there were flash forwards, and there were a bunch of time skips, and it was very confusing. I don't know if it would have been any less confusing not on audio, but this was so much. And I don't know if I enjoyed it, which makes me very sad because I love Jay Kristoff's writing. I love his insults are my favorite thing. He had a lot of them in Nevernight, but this one was even funnier. Like, some of the insults literally had us laughing hysterically out loud because they're just so bizarre and well done. But yes, most anticipated book of the year is like 3 stars, so that's depressing. Also did not scratch the vampire itch. A couple of books did this year, but this didn't do it for me. I think it's perfectly fine if you are in a high fantasy mood or that's something you read regularly. This might read better for you. Did not go well for me in the current point of my life and reading tastes. And then I participated in Smudathon, which is hosted by Riley Marie and Lainey, I believe. And I think that I made a mistake by starting with the author that is going to be able to do the smut really well, that I am perfectly fine with and okay with and like even enjoy, especially writing style wise. And then everything else just feels like it's downhill from these two authors that I really, really like so far. So we'll see how that goes. If you know anything that is remotely the same as either of these authors I'm about to talk about, please tell me in the comments down below, because I have a lot to say. So the first book that I read on ebook is Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRoe. And this was fantastic. I will say there are a million triggers at the very beginning of this. Let me go read those, which honestly I appreciate. I think all books should just have a list of triggers at the very, very beginning. It says this book contains graphic, violent, sexual content and is not intended for anyone under the legal age of adulthood. All characters depicted here are 18 years of age. They must not be used as a resource for sexual education or as informational guide to sex or BDSM. And the kinks and fetishes within this book are consensual, non-consent, breath play, choking, blood play, spit, swallowing, bladder fluids, needle play, pain play, fear play, public play, bondage, restraint, spanking, erotic, humiliation, raw sex, and sex without a condom. So going in, knowing every single one of those things was actually very, very helpful because I've never had any sort of, okay, do you guys remember when I was back in, was it January? It might have been February when I read Wolf Song by TJ Klune, and I had a very visceral reaction to it and put it on my like least favorite books of all time list. I think that was because I wasn't prepared being 60+% into a book and having things that are like very specific triggers to me as a person because of my experiences. And I had a visceral reaction to things that were happening in those sex scenes. So we have come full circle many, many, many months later of people listing exactly what is in this book before even starting it or knowing who the characters were is all I want in every book ever now. Especially if there are sex scenes or like romance scenes in which there might be triggers for people. So authors, please do this. But anyways, I love Harley's writing. I loved the world of this. Like, I will say that the romance I thought was perfectly fine. It is very much like consensual, non-consent. And the thing that I really liked about this is that he immediately gives the girl a safe word, like immediately upon meeting her. Goes, hey, what's your safe word? And she knows it. And then they go into things, which I have now realized I need in like almost every romance ever, especially if you're going to have the more graphic romance. Especially with like super dom males, which he is. He's more of a protective dom male rather than like an actual jerk who's trying to hurt someone, which I appreciated. I don't mind the protectiveness of it. This also started conversation and how I ended up with the next two books that I read. I love this book. I need to buy it. This is actually Kate's copy. I need to buy it because the cover is beautiful. And I'm going to try to read all of Harley's books from now on. I know I want to read her other book, The Dare, which got banned from Amazon for some reason, and it has become a meme on the internet. I have the second book in this companion series on my Kindle, so I will probably read that in the near future as well, because I really, really did love this world and Harley's writing. So if you know anybody who has similar things to Harley, let me know. And then the two books that I read because of that book, because I was trying to participate in Smudathon, but my whole thing is I don't like super overly dom males as a love interest if the girl is just super submissive and just lets him do whatever he wants. Like, that is not enjoyable for me. I am not attracted to that entire concept. So Kate actually asked Riley for any sort of like more dom girl recommendations, and Riley only had one, so I tried that author and I really enjoyed it and read another of the author's books. So I read two novellas. The first one is called Chenny, I believe is how it's pronounced, and this is about a girl who is a marriage of convenience, which I also realized that I really like, in which her aunt dies and she goes to the funeral and her aunt has left her things, and in her will she has said that Chenny has to marry this man that she knew that the grandma knew, the aunt, I'm sorry. She has to marry him and they can get it annulled after 30 days, but they have to live together and be a couple for 30 days. And she meets him at this reading of the will, and he's this really like big dude, and he's Scottish. He's very nice. He's very like kind of awkward and bumbly, and I loved him so much. He might be one of my favorite male love interests that I've read in a very long time, if not ever. And it's just how they navigate this 30-day contract that they have to fulfill in order to get the money, because he needs the money for some reason and she needs it for another. And so they were like, okay, we'll do this for money. And then they obviously start to fall for each other, and it was so cute. These sex scenes were probably the best sex scenes I've read in a really long time, and definitely more in the direction that I want and any form of smut. So if you know of any authors that are remotely similar to Rebecca Weatherspoon in the way that they write their smut, please let me know, because I have been trying so hard to find anything remotely similar to this. And the other book, which is actually technically the first novella in this series that I read, is Rafe, and the little underscore line is Rafe, a buff male nanny. And I was like, that sounds hilarious. Now I have to read it, especially now that I know that I like this author's writing. This was so cute. Like, it's definitely not, it's not as much of the aggressive male smut as Her Soul to Take, but it is not the like more switch smut that Shenny felt like. So this was an in-between that I also really liked. Also, the male in this was very, very sweet, but like he was manly man, which a lot of romance is, which is why I tried not to read much romance, because I don't really want that in my men. I feel like this is getting really personal about me and what I like in humans, but that's a whole nother conversation. But this story was adorable. It is about this man who takes a nannying job. He's been a nanny for years, and he takes this random nannying job for a single mother, and him and the mother start to fall for each other, and the kids were some of the best written kids that I've read in a while. I feel like I just talked about a book that had really well written kids. What was that? I don't remember. But again, it's really hard to write kids that sound accurate to their age, or to find that in novels, in my opinion, as somebody who has worked with kids who are like toddler to like young child age. And this one did it really, really well. The man was super adorable with the kids. I really liked the mom. And I thought this was a very, very believable romance. So yes, Rebecca Weatherspoon and Harley LaRue have been ruining my life, because now I don't even know where to look with other romances that are even remotely similar enough to either of them, because I think we started out with the best ones, and now I don't know how to go from here to find other authors that I like. So if you have any suggestions based off of either of those authors, please let me know. But yes, those are the 18 books that I read in the month of October. I did a lot of reading. I might take a break, but there are several things that I really want to read before the end of the year, and the end of the year is creeping up on us all of a sudden. So we'll see how next month's wrap up goes. But those are all the things that I read in the month of October. Let me know what you read in the comments down below. If you have any romance recommendations remotely similar to either one of those romance authors I just talked about, please talk to me. I need suggestions or recommendations of some kind, because I don't know where to go from here, but I was enjoying the whole Smutathon experience. So please talk to me in the comments down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.